Talk radio from the uplifting to the unexplained since January 1997. We began our 25th year in broadcasting in January 2022, and we're just getting started, exploring the edge of human consciousness and possibility on planet Earth with founder and journalist Nicole Marie Whitney at the helm. What's really real and what's really possible? That is what we want to know. Join us at newsforthesoul.com. Newsforthesoul.com.
Next on News for the Soul Radio, it's time for Purrrfectly Holistic with Pam. Pam is a cat mom and holistic health seeker who, after suffering an injury that wouldn't heal, was led on a journey to seek out alternative, holistic, and natural medicine. She now shares what she learned, helping people and their cats along their path to holistic health. Pam has taken courses in holistic health for animals, muscle testing, and animal communication. Please welcome Pam. Back to News for the Soul.
Hey everyone, how are you? Thanks for joining us tonight on Purrrfectly Holistic Radio Show. Hope you're having a great Monday. It's been a very interesting past 3 weeks, and you know how you get those messages from the universe when the same thing keeps appearing in your circle or in your path, and that happened to me. It probably started about 3 weeks ago, and I was getting question after question and clients asking about cats with GI issues, suspected IBD issues. I mean, it was like over and over again. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have to really dive into this subject, and we need to do some research and figure out, what exactly is it and how do you test for it? What causes IBD in pets? And what can you do about it? Because I think a lot of people feel so frustrated and kind of helpless, like have labeled, for their pets the rest of their life. And I really just want you guys to feel more educated and empowered. And that's one of my purposes with Purrrfectly Holistic, is to educate and empower pet parents to provide a more holistic approach with their pets, especially cats. That's my specialty. So the topic of tonight is going to be IBD and cats. So thank you so much for joining me. And I got people listening in from Facebook, our Facebook page, and YouTube tonight. And you are welcome to submit comments as well. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. And we're going to start by just jumping in here. I wanted to start out by saying that many vets prescribe steroids and other medications in IBD cases. So disclaimer here, I am not a vet and I don't have a working knowledge of such drugs. So I cannot speak about those tonight. So tonight's discussion will focus more on getting to the root cause of IBD issues and using a more holistic approach to healing and recovery. This information is not meant to replace regular veterinary care, but it can be a great complement to it. And I'll be putting on the show notes at newsforthesoul.com, I will be putting links to all of the resources that I dove into over the last 3 weeks to put all this information together. So I recommend that you do your own research. You can take notes tonight if you want to. You can gather some great information, but by all means, dive in and research for yourself and really trust your gut. That's why we're given an intuition, and it does work if we give it a chance. So I just want to say hi real quick to some people who are hopping on. So, hey, Marissa, nice to see you. And Liza and Madison is here. So thank you guys. If you are watching, drop me a hello. Hey, Danielle. I love to say hi to people as they hop on. I appreciate you guys coming in tonight and spending some time with me. So I'm going to jump in here because we have a lot to cover, and I want to be sure to take time for comments as well. Okay, so let's start by talking about exactly what is IBD. So IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, is an inflammatory condition of the intestines. And I'm reading off my notes here, so if I look over, that's why. So let's see here. So we're going to go through this, and we're going to talk about what it is first. There are actually several types, and I did not know this. And the type depends on the kind of white blood cells that are present. And the most common types are a lymphocytic, plasmacytic centeritis. Oh God, I probably just butchered that word. Gastritis and colitis. So some of you may have received a diagnosis for your pet with some of those, like gastritis, colitis, plasmacytic enteritis. So a lot of big words. So other factors that are present with IBD can include leaky gut. And this is basically a condition where inflammation weakens the tight junctions of the gastrointestinal tract. And we'll talk about tight junctions a little bit later. But the body can develop an immune reaction that leads to allergies and even autoimmune disease if you have leaky gut syndrome, if you have a condition of dysbiosis where the integrity of the intestinal wall is not there. You can also have secondary infections with IBD. You can have organ degeneration. So most commonly, it affects the liver and the kidneys. So those are some things to look out for if your cat or dog is having suspected IBD issues. Also, nutritional deficiencies are common because the inflammation in the GI tract, in the intestines, disrupts the ability to absorb and use the nutrients. So that is a red flag if your cat's like losing weight, if they're eating but they just don't seem to be absorbing their nutrients, if they're always hungry and you're feeding and they're losing weight. Those are signs to kind of look for. Let's talk about common symptoms of IBD. One of the most common, of course, is diarrhea. Nobody likes diarrhea, especially pet parents who have to clean up after our pets. Another one is constipation and diarrhea fluctuating, because it can be both ends. You could have some stoppage and you could have a lot of fluid going on. Another one is vomiting. Hairballs. Probably didn't realize that chronic hairballs can be tied to IBD. Regurgitation. So regurgitation is when your cat or dog is eating and then immediately just regurgitates. It's not, there hasn't been time for the food to actually make it all the way into the stomach to settle in there and start the digestive process. It's like it gets in there and then it comes right back up. Gas is another common symptom of IBD, as well as abdominal pain. If you've ever noticed your pet, specifically cats, they kind of sit in a loaf position and they kind of tuck their feet in and they just look very, very uncomfortable. They don't move a whole lot. They're probably experiencing some abdominal pain. They also would have potentially a loss of appetite, because that's a common symptom of IBD, and they can also have discolored lips or gums. So those are some things to just kind of watch for, because those are symptoms. So I'm going to go over here to some questions. So can IBD turn into lymphoma? Yes, it actually can. So that is why we want to intervene as soon as you start to see any of these symptoms, and we'll talk about that tonight. IBD stands for irritable bowel disease, inflammatory bowel disease. Thank you, Marissa. Inflammatory bowel disease. Let me see if there's any other questions here. Yes, Liza, we can certainly schedule a time to chat about this. No problem. Just check my calendar. Okay, so moving on, we're going to go talk about and throw in your questions. I'm trying to go between screens So if you have any questions about symptoms so far, let me know. Yeah, Madison's cat, Sweet Aspen, was on budesonide. Like I said in the beginning of the show, should you give steroids? I can't speak about steroids because I'm not trained in steroids. So I know that some integrative vets do use a combination of steroid plus other nutritional support. It's not uncommon just because steroids, they're really, really good about suppressing the immune system and stopping the inflammation. Just remember, it's a temporary fix. It's not a fix. And suppressing the immune system when your cat needs the body to work the way it's designed, it can be really challenging to heal if you have an immune issue. Okay, so we are going to move to common causes of IBD. And I want you guys to really think about this and just see if any of this resonates with you in the pet that you might be dealing with, and just kind of check things off if this may sound like a potential underlying cause. One of the biggest surprises that I had doing the research was finding out one of the most common causes of IBD is actually parasites. And it could be parasites that you didn't even know about that have been going on for years. So I'll give you two examples. Just when I was learning about all of this, a couple of clients I think a couple that one maybe knew, and then one was someone that I have worked with in the past. And this GI issues, chronic ups and downs and things like that. I went back to a couple of these clients that have had ongoing issues, and I used muscle testing to check to see if any of these unknown causes to me resonated, specifically parasites. And I got yeses for both pets. So I was like, wow, maybe this is the missing link that we have been looking for. And they were protozoa. I'm not talking about fleas. I'm not talking about hookworms, roundworms, and those kind of things. I'm talking about single cell organisms, protozoas that are, a real booger to treat, so that is something that you can also check more into, and maybe do some more testing for parasites. Okay, so parasites was one of the main causes that most people don't know about. And then the second one was antibiotics. Why antibiotics? Because antibiotics destroy the healthy gut flora and the balance of good and bad gut flora in the microbiome. So when that gets off kilter, you can start to have a host of these other issues. Steroids can actually cause IBD because they are chemical, they are pharmaceutical. They suppress the immune system, but they can also damage the intestinal lining. So that's why vets don't like to give them for long periods of time, because they do some damage. Another common cause of IBD in pets is food sensitivity. And I think I see this quite a lot with my GI issue clients. There tends to be some kind of food sensitivity. The most common ones, according to the articles that I read, were chicken, beef, fish, grains, and eggs. So let's talk about that for a second. Chicken is in everything, right? It's hard to avoid chicken for a lot of people when it comes to their pet food. So one of the first things that I tell my clients, are just chatting with people who are just asking questions, is you've got to change the protein. So if your cat starts vomiting, if they have the diarrhea, rule out a food sensitivity by changing the protein. That would be like the first thing that I would try. and see if that resolves the issue. Because if you have ongoing food sensitivities that are chronic, and you may not even realize they're chronic, they can cause chronic inflammation, which can lead to IBD, irritable bowel, and inflammatory bowel disease. So those are some things to look for immediately, are the proteins that you're feeding. And another note about the chicken is considered what they call a hot protein in traditional Chinese medicine. And hot proteins cause heat in the body, and inflammation is about heat. So taking your pet who has IBD issues or even IBS issues off of the hot protein like chicken can help in kind of cooling the body down, so you're not contributing to more heat in the body. And then grains, if you think about it, grains, where do we get the grains from pet food? Mostly in dry food. So we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight too. Dry food and grains are a no-no. So another common cause of IBD is emotional stress, where you have increased cortisol levels. So cortisol is a stress hormone. So if those levels are constantly up, it's like the off button never gets switched. It's like constant stress. Well, that obviously creates stress in the body when you have elevated cortisol. So emotional stress, just like we have emotional stress as humans, our pets can pick up on our emotional stress as well, and they can have emotional stress based on what's going on in their environment. So that's something to look at. And then genetics can actually be a common cause of IBD. So, maybe it's not your pet's fault. Maybe they're predisposed because of the breed, or something that was passed on from their mother or the father of the pet. You just don't know, but that was one of the causes, and I was kind of surprised about that. I did not know that. Poor nutrition at a young age can actually be a cause of IBD, and I think one of the reasons that is because it starts the microbiome off as imbalanced. So if they're not eating a proper diet, let's say a species appropriate wet diet for cats, meat-based carnivore diet, then you're already wrecking the microbiome from a very young age. So that's something to think about. And then the other one, traditional Chinese medicine conditions affecting the body's qi, which is their energy, in the spleen, the stomach, the liver, and the gallbladder. So if the energy in those 4 organs are off, if it's interrupted, if it's blocked, if it's stagnant, that can affect the body's be a cause of irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel disease. So let me check over here and see if you guys have any questions so far that I can answer real quick. Okay, yeah, so Eliza says you took chicken away. Good job. Can a sonogram tell if a cat has IBD or lymphoma? Because I won't do an endoscopy. Snowball is allergic to anesthesia. Ooh, that's a question for your vet. Not sure. I think a sonogram. I know what you're talking. Okay, never had a baby, so that's the one you put over the belly without the anesthesia. I think that's what you're talking about, correct? Possibly, but again, I don't know because I'm not a vet and I never used a sonogram. So it's possible, but that would be a great question for your vet. Okay, let's see here. Lisa says, I just started probiotics. We have intermittent bouts of tummy issues. Bob has allergies to chicken, beef, turkey, and lamb, so finding foods is tough. And with CKD, especially hard due to phosphorus. Yeah, there's phosphorus binders if needed that you can use. Just make sure that they're eating a species appropriate food, preferably raw, freeze dried. Even if it's not a low phosphorus maybe adding in those phosphorus binders, which bind the phosphorus in the food. Instead of running it through the kidneys, it's pulled out right through the GI tract. So that could be something that you could look at. And then a question about, would acupuncture help with IBD? Yes, absolutely, because it does help rebalance the chi, the energy in the body, and it works through all the meridians that go through the body, affecting all the organs and glands and body systems. So I am a huge proponent of acupuncture. Okay, so we are going to move on a little bit to let's talk about microbiome disruption. And this is really a key thing that we all have to really take to heart. Remember, the immune system is located in the microbiome. Over 70% of the immune system is in the microbiome. So in 2008, there was a study that looked into whether there was a difference between the gut flora of a cat with IBD versus a cat with a healthy microbiome. And what they found was a large imbalance in the intestinal flora. So the cats with the IBD had a 66% of Enterobacteriaceae species. I think that said that right. They had a 60% of this particular strain of bacteria in the gut compared to a healthy cat that had less than 0.3%. So that's a huge skew. And the healthy gut also showed more variety of a bacteria. So you had more Streptococcus, bacterioides, bacteroides, I cannot say these words, Clostridium, E. coli, and other bacteria. Remember, even things like E. coli, we all have E. coli in our bodies, okay? So E. coli itself is not bad. It's when it becomes imbalanced. There has to be a balance of everything. When you have too much of one thing, it can cause a problem. When you have too little of one thing, it can cause a problem. It allows something to overgrow that shouldn't overgrow and vice versa. So having that healthy gut balance is what we're trying to achieve here. And diet, we're going to talk about diet here. Diet plays a huge role in the microbiome disruption or balance. So in one study, cats were divided into two groups, and they were fed either a processed wet or dry diet. And after 5 weeks, they discovered a dramatic shift in the fecal bacterial communities. So that's all the bacteria flora. So bifidobacteria were not present in either the dry food or the wet food group of cats. In this study, fecal lactobacillus population was much greater in the dry food fed cats. These results demonstrated that short-term dietary exposure to processed dry or wet food leads to a large shift in the fecal bacteria populations that can affect the ability for the cat to process macronutrients in the diet. This is one of the reasons you see diarrhea in cats when you suddenly change their diet. It's because you're changing the microbiome. And this is really important to remember and just to really kind of think about. So we all need certain strains of bacteria to break down the food and assimilate the food in our gut. And if we don't have enough of or truly deficient in a certain type of bacteria, when you eat a food that requires that bacteria, it can really wreck your gut. It can cause, gas and bloating and diarrhea and vomiting and things like that because they just don't have enough of those little microorganisms to break down and assimilate those particular macronutrients. So if you have a cat or a dog that is a really sensitive stomach, just go slowly when you're transitioning, because you have to give the body the right the microbiota that it needs to be able to adjust things. So just remember that if they're having trouble when you're switching, it's just because you've changed the microbiome, and the foods that they eat and the exposure that they've had will affect their ability to digest that food or not. So let's see. we are going to talk. Let me check some questions over here. Let's see if I can get some. Madison asks, should I talk to the vet about taking off budesonide? Again, I don't really know. I don't work with drugs. Carmel never showed symptoms. Vet just said her stomach and intestines didn't feel right. She's FIV positive and low appetite. She also has hypothyroidism. Yeah, that would be a longer discussion. I don't have a quick answer for you, Madison. Yeah, so sorry, I can't jump into that one tonight. And then Jen says, did you find any information on using fecal implants for cats with IBD? Yes. So yeah, that we'll get to that a little bit later. Absolutely. Okay. So great questions so far. So we're going to talk about some additional causes of inflammation now. And I think it's real important to remember that even if you're feeding your cat a wet food, a canned diet, it's still processed. Okay. I sometimes feed my cats canned food, pouch food, and all that. It's great. I've switched more to freeze-dried and raw than canned and pouches. And I'm seeing a difference in their teeth, which is incredible. But let's talk, I know it's more expensive, and so you have to do the best you can with whatever you can afford. But let's just talk about some of the causes of inflammation. One of those ingredients in processed wet food is carrageenan. So carrageenan is a seaweed that has been alkalized. So it has a high pH in the processing procedure, and it forms into something called sulfate polygalactin. It is a known cause of GI inflammation in humans and causes ulcers and tumors. Carrageenan is a common thickener found in canned pet food. So check your labels. If you're using a canned food with carrageenan, go ahead and take that out of the rotation. Take it out of your cat's diet. Okay, especially if they have IBD, because you're just creating more inflammation. And the second cause of inflammation in terms of processed food is something called Maillard reactions. Maillard reactions from heat processing used to manufacture pet foods. So it's like when sugar, this is what happens when sugar and amino acids are combined under a high heat, it creates a browning effect similar to toast. So, you toast your bread in the oven and it has that like crunch, that little tan color, brown color to it. That is a Maillard reaction. So an article in Dogs and Cat Naturally discussed the Maillard reaction byproduct further, stating the study. In 2014, a study took a look at how much Maillard byproducts were present in pet food. And they found the content was 129 times higher in dog food and 40 times higher in cat food compared to the average intake in human consumption. So our pets are getting a lot more Maillard reaction byproducts than we are. But what we do know is that rat studies have shown that 5-hydroxymethylfurfural byproduct of thermally processed foods like French fries are carcinogenic. So just remember, the only problem is they don't know exactly how much Maillard byproduct it takes to cause cancer in humans or in our pets. So that is another reason to avoid processed food as much as you can. Just something to keep in mind, because even if it's wet food, it's still processed under high heat. Absolutely, wet food is better than dry food any day of the week because of the type of ingredients they have to use in dry food. So if you have to choose, go with the wet food any day of the week. Okay, so let's go over here. Question. Guar gum and agar. That did not come up as a toxic cause, inflammatory cause in the research that I did. So I think you're okay with that. And thank you for Marissa for posting some information on fecal implants. And let's see. Joan says, my cat seems to have difficulty digesting frozen raw food. He goes into abdominal pain after eating frozen raw. Even when I partially cook it, he seems better with freeze-dried. Could this difficulty be from pancreas issues? It may be pancreas issues, but it also may be a microbiome. It might be the bacteria that are needed to digest more of a raw food versus a freeze-dried product. So it could be just the quality, not quality, what's the word? The type of food. I would think maybe and that's a great question that you could go do some digging on, is what microbiota are required to break down raw food versus a freeze-dried or a canned food. There might be a bigger difference, and he might need more of something in order to make that process easier on him. So that would be a great little research project. And okay, so we're going to move on to testing. So one of the things that you want to do if you want to find out if your cat has IBD, there was actually 3 things that were recommended by Dr. Karen Becker. One is a biopsy of the intestinal tissue. And this is a more expensive and risky procedure. So she says do options 2 and 3 first. So I would say biopsy would be the very last thing. If you can rule out get your answers from one of these other 2 tests first, that would be recommended. So the second test is called a functional GI test. And this test checks for the levels of folate and cobalamin, which are both B vitamins, and whether they are being absorbed or not. So folate, if the levels are too high, there's a problem with SIBO, which is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. If the folate levels are too low, then there is a disease of the small intestine. As far as cobalamin, the other B vitamin, if the levels are too low, then there's a digestion problem in the small intestines. So those would be, it's called a functional GI test, and you can have your vet run that. I think they send off the sample or the blood work to Texas A&M lab, veterinary school. They have a lab, I know, and there's probably other schools too, but I know for sure there's one at Texas A&M that vets send off to get this test done. So it would be worth it to know if your cat is absorbing these B vitamins or not, because that would be a very, very strong indicator if they have IBD or not. And the third test is called a pancreas function assessment. And there are 2 parts. There's a TLI and a PLI. And it's not uncommon for pets with IBD to have pancreatitis. It could be ongoing chronic pancreatitis. So the 2 pancreas function tests, TLI and PLI, you can ask your vet to do those 2 as well. And Dr. Becker actually recommends doing both the functional GI test along with the 2 tests for the pancreas function, so you can get a bigger picture of what's going on. Okay, how are we doing on questions? Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to holistic solutions for cats. So let's just say you've done one of those, at least 1 or 2 of those tests. You've checked a lot of those boxes for, causes or symptoms and causes. And so now you're like, okay, my cat has this disease. What can I do about it? So we're going to talk about solutions, because I want to leave you guys with a lot of specific answers and tips that I found in the research. And the first one is foundational, and it's basically a species appropriate diet. So a species appropriate diet is by far the most important change that you can work to make. And like I said, sometimes you may have to transition very slowly. It depends on the cat or the dog. But if you can move toward a species appropriate diet, that would be ideal. Raw food or freeze-dried foods add high quality, highly digestible sources of animal protein. That means there's very little residue left over. That's why when pets are on a raw food or freeze-dried diet, their poop is like this big, because their body is absorbing and using all the nutrients in it. Also in here, as far as diet, no rendered products, no byproducts. So look at the labels on your pet food, turn it around and look and see if there are any byproducts, because byproducts are going to be rendered products, and rendering processes is awful. Rendered foods can be anything from from dead animals, diseased animals, dying animals, roadkill, pets that have been euthanized. They put all these animal products, even livestock that have died. They put them in this big rendering pot, and it's nasty. And it is, if you've ever talked to someone who has worked for a rendering plant, it is probably the most disgusting place you will ever go. It smells horrendous. So it is not a healthy food. So no rendered products, no byproducts, okay? Moisture rich, add water and bone broth. So make sure the diet is moisture rich. Cats need moisture, not dry food. So bone broth is a great source of collagen and minerals, which aid in repairing the tissue in the GI tract. So if you can, they make bone broth products for pets. I know Merrick has one, Primal has some. You can make homemade bone broth. Just eliminate the onion, and you can put a little bit of garlic in there, but I would just leave out the onion. Just boil, make homemade broth with just with the bones from the carcass, and add a little apple cider vinegar, maybe some herbs, and you're good. And it says also, one of the tips was, in some cases where there is pancreatitis or a sluggish gallbladder was not producing enough bile. So choosing a lower fat protein like rabbit, venison, chicken breast, if your cat can have chicken, turkey, bison, pork tenderloin. So choose your leaner meats if you suspect there might be a pancreatitis issue, or if there's a sluggish gallbladder. If the gallbladder is not producing enough bile, it's going to have a hard time breaking down those fats and moving them through the GI tract. So that can cause some inflammation and sluggishness. So the other thing to think about is low fiber to help motility and provide a good food source for the healthy gut flora. So for example, add something like a plantain or a psyllium husk powder. Coconut oil is a great fiber source. Aloe juice, not that cream, okay? Acacia fiber, canned pumpkin, prebiotic-rich veggies like pureed asparagus, sunchokes, dark leafy greens. Those are all great fiber sources. And then you can also look at food therapy. Traditional Chinese medicine considers neutral and cooling proteins for cats with IBD. So cooling proteins would be like your duck, your rabbit, your turkey. Your neutral proteins would be your beef, your bison, pork, herring, mackerel. And then even novel protein choices, if you're suspecting that there's a food sensitivity issue. Like I said earlier, change the protein and see if that helps resolve some of those issues. So diet is huge, guys. We've got to really think about diet. Okay, I'm going to come over here and check some of these questions. So Madison says, I can't get my kitties to eat bone broth. Madison, what I do is I just pour a little bit into my cat's food and mix it in. So if you're using canned food, just mix a little bit in there and make it juicy. I use it with my freeze-dried food. I do a little bone broth and maybe a little extra water. And even in my raw food, I add a little bit of bone broth, and my cats really like that. But you might have to start with small amounts. I don't expect cats to just go up and drink a bunch of bone broth by itself. So I do mix it into the food. Okay. And then let's go on to the next holistic solution for cats with IBD is balancing the healthy gut flora. So I know we talked a lot about microbiome and microorganisms and bacteria. So here's something that came up in the research that was very, very interesting, and it makes a lot of sense. And I've actually used this product that I'm going to talk about with one of my own cats last year. And so it's recommended by companies that make fecal transplant products like Animal Biome. Okay, so there is a product called Saccharomyces Boulardii, or they call it S. Boulardii for short. And that's S period, capital Boulardii. And it is a non-colonizing yeast that is anti-inflammatory, and it supports the healthy gut flora. During its passage through the intestine, S. Boulardii mimics the physiological effects of the digestive flora, and it stimulates a healthy immune response and reduces inflammation. The research demonstrates its ability to mimic the healthy intestinal walls, which attracts pathogens and results in excretion of those pathogens rather than them colonizing. And so they recommend giving it twice a day. And then the Jarrow brand S. Boulardii also contains MOS, and that is mannan oligosaccharides. And MOS is a prebiotic. That's food for probiotics, guys. A prebiotic that stimulates growth of beneficial bacteria. However, in contrast to other popular prebiotics like inulin and fructooligosaccharides, FOS, MOS has a direct impact on the pathogenic gut bacteria colonization. So what happens is there's a crossover with those two together. They both specialize in different pathogens, which is why they're so effective when you use them together. So there again, the brand is Jarrow, Jarrow, Jarrow S. Boulardii with MOS is what you want to look for. Really good stuff. And if you are going to use the S. Boulardii in my testing for clients, they don't need another probiotic on top of this. Let this stuff work for 2 or 3 months. Let it do its thing to help rebalance stuff. And then you can start adding a regular probiotic in lieu of this. So that's something that you can kind of play with. And then we all know about probiotics. So probiotics, if your cat doesn't need an S. Boulardii right away, or maybe after you've used S. Boulardii for a couple months, probiotics can reduce pathogenic bacteria and in the intestinal pH. So we want your intestinal pH to be more acidic, not alkaline. And probiotics produce antimicrobials, antivirals, antibacterial products to fight against bacteria, which competes with or depletes the nutrients and can occupy the binding sites of the bacteria. So you want to rotate brands. So integrative vets recommend rotating the brands of probiotics in order to get a better variety and qualities of the strain. So you don't want to keep doing the same probiotic over and over and over again, because you're only replacing those strains over and over and over. So if you switch it up and use a different brand, they source them from different places and they have different quantities and they have different strains. So mix it all up so that you can provide more variety for your cat's gut. And then another option that you can add in would be raw goat's milk or kefir products. They're a really great they're food sources of probiotics. You may not be able to give enough of it as a food source. You could add it as like an extra. kind of a treat or whatever. And they recommend using a plain, low to no sugar product. Okay. So not the kind that we would enjoy, probably the kind we would not like, the plain. That's the one you want to give your pet. Okay. Let's see. All right. So we're going to go on to repair and restore integrity of the intestinal walls. So in our steps of providing holistic solutions, number 3 is repair and restore the intestinal walls. Remember, leaky gut or dysbiosis occurs when the tight junctions in the cells in the intestinal wall start to come open. So they're no longer tight, okay? And when they're open, you have toxins and chemicals and drugs and heavy metals and pathogens that sneak through that wall, and they get right into the bloodstream. And so as a result, you have inflammation. And what's really bad is over time, your body develops allergies and even autoimmune conditions, and where the immune system attacks its own body. So you've got to remember, we've got to restore the integrity of that intestinal wall, okay? Because that houses the immune system. Using a soil-based product with fulvic or humic acid repairs these tight junctions. And so my favorite supplement that I learned about from holistic vets is called Ion Gut Support for Pets by Ion Biome. I carry it in my store. And it was developed by Dr. Zach Bush. He's a famous doctor who's all about natural healing. And he does a ton of research regarding soil and the microbiome. So the tight junctions create a multi-layer protein network that functions as an intelligent gateway for the entry or blockage of nutrients and toxins and microbes. And so Ion Gut Support is a liquid soil-derived carbon-based supplement that encourages those cells to communicate and promotes immune function that gives a gut the terrain where the microbiome can thrive. Okay, so it builds its home. And then it also benefits the kidneys. So if you have a cat with kidney disease, they need to be on this product because kidneys have the same type of epithelial layer of cells. So it can really help support the kidneys and their function. So it looks like tinted water, and it's tasteless. So you can just add this to your cat's food or your dog's food. So, okay, so number 3 was we've got to restore the integrity of that leaky gut, right? We've got to restore the integrity of the tight junctions in the intestinal lining. This 4th thing that you can do is improve digestion and absorption of nutrients. So one of the biggest things that you can do is to add digestive enzymes, providing the protease, amylase, and lipase to break down and assimilate the food. Especially if your cat has pancreas issues, you need to support the pancreas with digestive enzymes. And then raw food provides naturally occurring living enzymes. And just remember that heat processing kills the living enzymes, which are necessary for all the biochemical processes in the body. So that's why raw food is so good, even for us as humans. Anytime you heat your food, you break those things down. So go for the living enzymes if you can, and then if you need to, you can add the digestive enzymes for the heated and processed foods. It's a good practice all the way around, especially if your cat has pancreas issues. B12 or B vitamin supplement can help if there's an issue with absorption. And we go back to the tests that you may have run for the GI function panel. Okay. So, and just as a little side note, B12 is also really helpful as an immune and energy booster. So adding some B vitamins or weekly B12 or B12 supplement a couple times a week might be really, really good way to support the immune system as well as the GI tract and improving digestion and absorbing those nutrients. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how to reduce inflammation. So there are many supplements that have shown to reduce inflammation in the GI tract. And so things like slippery elm and marshmallow root and licorice root, boswellia serrata, which is frankincense, L-glutamine, which is an amino acid, curcumin, and omega-3 oils. These are all really, really great supplements to help reduce inflammation and soothe the GI tract, okay? And then we're going to talk about herbs. So there are several different types of herbs that are very, very beneficial for the treatment of IBD. Bitter herbs are one category, and they stimulate function and motility, which is moving the food through the GI tract. It increases the gastric secretions, so it helps break the food down. It normalizes the digestive function and balances intestinal flora. It increases the bile secretions because they've got to have the bile to break down the fats. And bitter herbs are also antimicrobial. And then there's a category called Withania herbs, which relieve gas and pain. And they are the aromatic herbs and spices like fennel and ginger, black pepper, clove, cinnamon, coriander, peppermint. Berberine herbs play a really huge role in regulating metabolism. And so examples would be barberry, Oregon grape, golden seal, philodendron, and tree turmeric. It is not the same as regular turmeric, which is curcuma longa. This is called tree turmeric, different herb. And one little note here, Mercola has a product called GI Support for Pets that Dr. Karen Becker formulated. And it has so many, a nice combination of all of these herbs. So if you are curious about it, I would highly recommend trying just GI Support for Pets by Mercola. If your cat is suspected to have some kind of an IBD issue, and just see how that works, because it is really, really excellent, the combination of stuff that she put in there. Almost here, we're going to wrap this up here really, really quick. So other modalities, I found a really nice article by Donna Kelleher, DVM, she's a vet, and she has successfully used NIET, which is Namburupad's allergy elimination technique, in eliminating allergies and sensitivities, because remember, that can be a root cause of this. Energy healing techniques, like the kind that I do, can also eliminate the physical, emotional, spiritual stressors and imbalances. So that plays a role in creating this whole inflammatory condition. Quantum muscle testing can be used to identify the stressors, the imbalances, the sensitivities, whether they be physical, emotional, or spiritual. So that's what I use in all of my work. I use muscle testing to identify everything and see what resonates with the body. And then homeopathy has also been used to treat symptoms of IBD. And there are a lot of remedies, and you really have to match the remedy with the symptoms. So some of the more common remedies used with IBD are phosphorus, arsenicum album, Mercurius corrosivus, Nux vomica, Lycopodium, Bryonia, and Podophyllum. If you want to learn more about those, just do a Google search or DuckDuckGo search on phosphorus for IBD, phosphorus homeopathy for IBD, or arsenicum album homeopathy for IBD, and see what pulls up, and you can read more about the descriptions of all of those. Now, as we wrap this up, Dr. Becker also put some recommendations for acute conditions. So if your pet is having an acute condition regarding an IBD flare-up of some kind, pets who are symptomatic is what she calls it. She said she recommends feeding a bland diet of cooked turkey with pumpkin or sweet potato, and then feed a novel protein source for a while. So that gives the GI tract some time to kind of calm down, and the immune system time to calm down and recover. So, and also introduce a new fiber source. So play around with some of the options that we talked about tonight. And she also said that in addition, electrolytes might be necessary if there's a lot of vomiting or diarrhea. Bone broth can be helpful, as well as plain Pedialyte. Those can help replace electrolytes as well. So there are about 7 resources that I use to compile everything tonight, which I will be putting on on the newsforthesoul.com website. If you guys want to go look in there and check those articles out, and I'm sure there's a whole lot more, but this was so much information. You are welcome to email me at pam@purrrfectlyholistic.com if you have specific questions. If you want to set up a time on my calendar to have a 20-minute consultation for free and go over questions, we can do that as well. I will drop the link to the calendar on the Facebook page under this post, as well as the YouTube post. Once it's loaded, I'll put the Calendly link on there as well. So feel free to reach out if you have, more questions, comments. Put the comments below, even if you're watching this video later, because it will be placed on those two sites as well. And I'm going to be compiling all this information in an article over the next couple of weeks or so. I've got a lot on my plate this next 2 weeks. So that's like one of my goals, to actually put it in all together and put it on my website so you can have it all there too. So I think we have time for like one more question, or let me just go over here real quick and just look and see if there was anything else that I can add or answer. Lisa asks, is the B12 given orally or on food? Whatever works. It's a cat, so maybe in a wet treat. I know that Feline Essential has a B12, which it's a liquid. So, try that, see how that works for you. Let's see. Oh, you guys are so welcome. And yeah, I think we're good. So anyway, thank you guys. I know it was a lot of information. Thank you so much for spending some time with me tonight. And next month, don't miss it, because Dr. Katie Woodley is back and we are talking about prescription diets. So your vet may want to put your cat on a prescription diet for IBD. And before you do that, you need to listen to our broadcast. Okay. So anyway, thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful rest of your night. Have a great week, and hug your cats for me. Give them all kisses, and we will see you next month. Thanks again. Have a good night.